There's lots of
Okay. We're slowly gathering our crowd. And we will begin here in just a minute. I'm going to ask you if you would mute your microphones if you're not presenting.
Dave, if we have folks that are connected, like that are having sound too, I believe you can mute them as well. If they're on a phone or something, it may just not be evident.
I will do that and then ask Heather, you and John to unmute yourselves. Okay. So, thank you all. My name is Dave Myers. I'm the director of the Berks Alliance. We do these community forums periodically, try to do them once a month. Sometimes we do them more often than that, sometimes less, but it's a great opportunity to have an important conversation about things that are of importance to our community. Today's topic, I think, is going to be one of those topics. I'll come back and cover some ground rules in a minute, but I'm going to turn it over to John Weidenhammer, who's the chair of the Berks Alliance. John?
Thanks, Dave, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining our presentation today. As Dave said, I think this is a really important topic for all of us in terms of, where will we get the news downstream. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation, and I want to thank both Dave and our presenters for their work in putting this session together today. I also just want to mention, and many of you on the call have heard me say this before, but the Berks Alliance is focused on community development, and our goal is to try to improve the health, wealth, and education attainment of the citizens of Berks County. And we try to make sure that there are a sufficient quantity of living wage jobs and an adequate supply of people to fill those jobs. And these sessions that we do pretty much monthly really are an important part of our community development work. So again, I thank everybody. Dave, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, John. We're going to ask everybody to keep your cameras on because it's always good to see live people, especially these days that we're doing way too much remotely. But to mute your microphones unless you're doing a presentation or we call on you. We asked you to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to submit questions and comments, and we'll try to get those covered at the end of the presentations. We do record this program, as John mentioned. We will send everybody who registered for the event a copy of the recording. We posted on the Berks Alliance website, and our good friends at BCTV posted on their website as well. So you'll get a chance to see it and hopefully enjoy it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Adams, who is going to coordinate our program today. Heather, to you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm so thankful for everybody joining today and happy to see lots of familiar faces. I'm thrilled to be serving as the Berks County project lead for this important study. The goal of the Spotlight PA Berks County project is to build the case and examine the feasibility for the elements to create a potential reporting bureau for Spotlight PA in Berks County. I would like to recognize and thank a few groups and individuals that have been key to helping getting this off the ground, and their continued support is really important. First, the Berks Alliance, thank you for hosting today. Spotlight PA, your team, and the folks at the American Journalism Project, and many others who have been very generous in sharing their contacts and their insight with our team in Berks County to get us up and running. The Berks Project Advisory Committee. We have formed an advisory committee of 9 individuals, many who are on the call today. They are Dave Myers, Kristen Boyd Edwards, Pat Giles, Mike Toledo, John Forrester, Dr. Jody Radosh, Anthony Orozco, Julia Klein, and Heidi Williamson. Appreciate the Berks County Community Foundation and their vision and interest in having a robust public engagement study done for this project. And of course, the BCTV staff and board for their support and their strategic vision in allowing me to take on this project. We'll talk more about the Berks County project and some specifics throughout the call. I'm also going to drop my contact information and some reference information into the chat during the call that you can follow up with me on. The voices of the residents of Berks County are key to this study. So I want to point out that Spotlight PA is being very intentional about not assuming what Berks County wants or needs or what this bureau should look like, but rather we're tapping the collective input of all of you and individuals and organizations across Berks County to build a bureau that we want and we deserve to help fill some of our news and information gaps in Berks County. So some key actions for this item will include small group listening sessions, focus groups, a digital survey, some one-on-one meetings, and more discussions that'll help to guide the potential formation of the Bureau. I'm looking forward to working with, and I've heard from a lot of you already on this project and getting your insight and your input to how we can build a reporting bureau that serves the county in the best way possible. The deliverables that I'll be taking from all of you as community members back to Spotlight PA at the end of the 12-month project will be a funding feasibility study, which I'm working in conjunction with Rick Blaine and Associates to test and survey the philanthropic market locally for support of a bureau. The framework for a bureau, including what the reporting beats are, where should journalists be positioned within the community, and what's the scalability of that bureau based on the conversations that we have and the issues and items that rise to the top as being key elements to be reported on. Partner publisher distribution, and then also delivery methods. So how does everyone want to receive this information? Spotlight PA makes their content available free to partner publishers, and building that network within our community, as well as some multimodal delivery, will be really important to distributing the content if and when it starts to be created within Berks County. And I'll also be producing a playbook for this study so that future communities can have access to what we're doing here as a really innovative way to study public engagement and media needs. So I'm going to introduce our speakers for today so that they can talk a little bit about the why behind this project. Our panelists are Chris Baxter. Chris is the CEO and the founding editor of Spotlight PA. Jim Friedlich, the executive director and CEO of the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. And Beth Schwenk. Beth is the executive director of the University of Pittsburgh Institute for Cyber Law, Policy, and Security, which houses the Pitt Disinformation Lab Initiative. So welcome to all of you. And I'm hoping we can start off the conversation with each of you giving a little bit of your background and interest in what the current news landscape is and the why behind why fixing it is important. So I'm not sure who would like to start on that.
Sure, I can jump in. Yeah, first I want to say thanks to the Berks Alliance. I mean, this is a fantastic group. The number of folks here invested and just showing up for this conversation is so heartening to me and to us at Spotlight PA. I want to say thanks to Heather, who is just doing an absolutely fantastic job. I don't think we could have envisioned a better person to partner with and do this with than Heather. And I just have to say how excited I am about this project. And part of what excites me about it is that we haven't made any decisions, right? Like, we are completely open-minded. We know what we can bring to the table at Spotlight PA. And I think if you follow our work on a statewide basis or what we've been doing in the State College region, you know what I'm talking about. And that is high quality journalism focused on topics that aren't getting enough attention, that drives real change and empowers people to get involved and drive that change. It's really vital accountability and public service journalism. It's vital to the health of our state and our communities. And unfortunately, we continue to see our sort of legacy institutions eroded at a rapid pace. And so to Heather, to your question as to why it's needed and what's going on, in some ways, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, because Reading was one of the first properties in Pennsylvania to fall, the Reading Eagle to fall into the hands of Alden Capital. And you all have seen exactly what that means. And that is not unique to the Reading Eagle. That is the same case in basically every publication that Alden has acquired, including just a couple weeks ago 4 significant daily papers in the Northeast Pennsylvania region when they acquired Times Shamrock. This is an urgent problem. And I think Beth will be able to talk a little bit about what happens when we lose this information infrastructure. We know a lot of bad things come about. And so there is an urgency to this. We feel that at Spotlight PA every single day. We are both thrilled to be in a space where we're building something new and positive in the news space. We're having a positive conversation about news, right? Most people's experience with news and the news industry of the past 20 years is negative, negative, negative. It's cutbacks, it's lower quality, it's less valuable to you, right? We're building something new, sort of a bold new path, and that is exciting for us. On the same token, though, we feel an immense responsibility because we see what's happening all around us on a daily basis. We don't have it all figured out, right? No one has it all figured out. But what's important to us is we're going to engage. We're not just going to sit here and watch it happen and have the bad things come and say, well, what could we have done, right? We're going to take action. And the only way it's going to work is if we all do it together. It's the only way it will be possible, right? What we can bring to the table in terms of the journalism, the quality, the service, the public service, but what the community has to bring to the table, right? And informing that work and supporting that work, it's a two-way street. And we all need to recognize that importance. And that's why I get so excited when I see numbers like today of folks showing up for this conversation and understanding the importance. So I'm excited to talk more, but I'm really just thrilled to see you all here.
Thank you so
Beth,
much, Chris.
why don't you go next, Beth, and then I'll try to
Sure,
wrap
you
up
can
there.
wrap us up on
Yeah.
this. So I think a lot of people are like, why is the executive director of a tech policy institute here? I spend a lot of time thinking about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, but the other thing that I spend a lot of time working on is disinformation, right? And I think we're all really aware that we are in this period of hyperpartisanship, of distrust, of misinformation, and it's all a cycle, and they're all feeding each other, right? And there's a lot of reasons for this. Campaign financing system, social media platform profit model, decline of traditional American social structures, right? We know a lot of the reasons, but one of the under-discussed and under-observed reasons for this really, I think, worrisome cycle of disinformation and distrust is the decline of local news media across the United States. And I think this decline has real consequences, and we're living them, we're seeing them in Reading, we're seeing them all across Berks County, in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, all across Western Pennsylvania, where I am. And you know, there aren't easy solutions to this, right? But the more time I spend researching disinformation, the more I come away seeing the value of local journalism. You know, where we have strong local journalism, we have less disinformation, we have less polarization, we have more trust, we have more civic engagement, and our communities are better off. So it is really exciting to be here and to be a part of this conversation, see how interested you all are in this, because it's pretty rare to have the opportunity to control something and fix something that feels, I think, so challenging and big and incredibly critical. So I'm excited to be here today, and thanks for having me. And Jim, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you, Chris. Just to do a sound check, can everybody hear me okay? Just give away. Oh, thank you. I'm Jim Friedlich, and I'm the executive director of something called the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. We're based in Philadelphia, but we have a statewide and to some extent national mandate to help revitalize local news in America. We're the nonprofit owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and from that came Spotlight PA in coordination with newspapers and websites and NPR stations all across the state. I wanted to just spend a moment talking about some of the both negative and positive trends, emphasize the positive worldwide, nationally, and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in nonprofit news. So it's a long way of saying I want to talk to you about what's possible. 7 years ago, a cable mogul, then 85 years old, named Jerry Lenfest, looked at his hometown newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and saw it going down the drain politically, economically, and in terms of its impact on the fabric of the city of Philadelphia. And he decided to buy it and donate it to a nonprofit, not for his own personal goals, but to help serve the city. And this was a really out of the box effort and out of the box thinking on his part at the time. Essentially, he was saying that if the Art Museum, Children's Hospital, University of Pennsylvania, the opera, the orchestra were supported philanthropically by local foundations, by local individuals, why not the newspaper? That a great city or great town is held together to a large degree by its newspaper. And as we've pursued that model, we found that we've been able to create world-class public service journalism about all the issues that we hold dear. John was led off the conversation by citing the goals of your community and your community foundation is health, wealth, education, the creation of living wage jobs. All of those issues of racial equity, issues of immigration and fairness and equity in Berks County are influenced by good, strong, independent news coverage. So what Jerry liked to say was that no matter what your first issue is, if it's education, green spaces, immigration, poverty and economic justice, political reform, accountability, whatever your first issue, journalism should be your second issue because journalism enables all of those things. What has happened in Philadelphia is we now have a very, very robust newspaper with a large investigative news staff, a large accountability news staff, other, we think, important functions like sports coverage and food coverage and all the rest that help the city feel like a cohesive and positive place to live. In the course of that work, we realized that the Inquirer, of course, is Philadelphia-based and influences the surrounding 4 or 5 counties, but the rest of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was suffering from many of the same issues. We decided to work with fellow newspapers and in one case, an NPR and PBS station, WITF in Harrisburg, to create something called Spotlight PA. And Spotlight PA has far exceeded our expectations. It now has more than 20 reporters and editors covering the state. They cover not just the state capital, but statewide issues. They've had by far the most effective coverage of the gubernatorial race, the Senate races, individual races around the state. They are devoutly nonpartisan. There is never a hint of having the thumb on the scale for one side or the other. They simply report the facts and report the truth. And as a result of that, Their news content is now used regularly in 90 or more other newspapers and websites and NPR stations and commercial radio stations around the state. So in the course of, what is it, Chris, 3.5 years? 4 years, this little toddler of a news organization has become the most important accountability journalism organization in the state of Pennsylvania, and has become a model that others have followed around the rest of the country. A part of that has become not only covering statewide and state house activity, but creating individual bureaus and individual hubs in important places. The first of those was State College, which Chris thought had statewide implications because of the presence of Penn State. And they've done an absolutely terrific job there with very limited resources. And what excites us about this is the idea that Berks County, once home to a once really terrific local newspaper, the Berkshire Eagle, which goes back to 1868, but has fallen into the wrong hands, has the potential to once again have a renaissance of local journalism that supports all the things that we hold dear. The goal is not to find new jobs for journalists. The goal is to support all of the things that we find important: a healthy democracy, again, in John's words, health, wealth, education, and living wages. So I'll close where I began, which is to say that there's a movement nationwide and in Pennsylvania and certainly in Philadelphia to support democracy and civic health through journalism, through nonprofit means. What had been a robust commercial business is no longer, but there's a very, very rapid growing movement in nonprofit journalism that Berks County could be a part of. The key to doing it right is to listen and to plan and to generate support for a collective vision rather than have someone come in and parachute in from the outside. You've already got that with Alden Global. So very, very happy to be here and happy to help in any way that we can.
Great. Well, Heather and I will do some questions. I've got a couple to start with right here. I think it's very significant, Jim, that you talked about the importance of local news. I think one of the challenges that we're facing here in Berks County, I've seen that in a couple of projects that I'm involved with, where people are saying they can't find out information about what's going on in our community. They can't find out information about the local governments here, government decision-making, issues that are important to the community. I wonder, Chris, if you would talk about how you would address that, how you plan to address that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we know, right, that access to quality information is a bedrock of strong community, right, region, state democracy. How can people make informed choices in their best interest, make an informed vote if they don't know what's going on, how their money's being spent, what programs are being run, and what's being done in their name? It's impossible, right? And that's part of the reason that I feel like the nonprofit model, while it's not the end all be all, right? It's not the pure solution, but why it's so important is because free and unfettered public access to this vital information is really critical, right? We can't just have those who can afford it have access to the information they need to make informed choices and have everyone else left in the dark. And I think we've already seen some signs in our politics over the past decade of what can happen when there are such huge gaps in education and especially sort of civic education. So from Spotlight PA's perspective, right, we take a two-pronged approach. We focus and report our work through an accountability lens. That doesn't mean everything is a 6 months investigation. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is, we are really trying to focus in on things that matter most to folks and to understand how those things are working or not, what the solutions are, right? And then the second component, which is equally as important, and that is the service, the public service component. And that's where we get into understanding how our government systems work, how the voting process works, why things happen the way they happen, how to influence and engage in those processes, and really more so than I think a lot of us are used to in terms of the role of the media, really directly engaging one-on-one with people to advance that education. I mean, it really does come back in a lot of ways to civic education. And I don't like to use that term because I think it means different things to different people. But at the end of the day, that is what we're doing, right? We are trying to be more direct and purposeful in providing, again, the nonpartisan information. We don't care what your stance is on this policy. We don't care what your politics are. We don't care who you're going to vote for. We just want you to make a vote that's in your best interest. And we want you to understand that when you make that vote and this person or that person is in office, this is what they're going to do. And this is what that means to you. Like, this is how this is going to play out. Again, regardless of where you are on that spectrum. So it's not, it's not just about this is what happened at the meeting today, right? We're less about the what, right? That's important, and we'll provide that, especially if there's no other source for that. But to us, more important is the how, why, and why it matters, right? The deeper context, the bigger picture. So we don't produce just, take our state coverage, for example. We're not covering every press conference, every turn of the screw, every movement of a bill that, frankly, that bill's never going to, pass anyways. All that kind of coverage that we're used to. We're really honing in on, these are the most important things that happen today here that could and will affect you. And here's how they're going to affect you. And then, and again, I really emphasize this, here's how you can then engage on that issue, right? That kind of agency, right? We don't want to just bash people over the head with problems. If we were just purely investigative and that's all we did, just be negative, 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 problem, 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 problem. And eventually people who even want that information, right, who are even avid news consumers, will tune out over time, because none of us, like any relationship we have, if it's all negative, it's not a good relationship, right? We need to provide agency as well. And the public service explanatory educational component is that agency, whereas all is not lost, right? You can still engage with the system. Here are ways you can do it. Here are ways we can help connect you with other people who want to do it. Here are ways we can help connect you with other communities in the state who want to do it, which is another really big component of the creation of Spotlight PA, a statewide entity, right? Prior to us, that really didn't exist. We had a lot of local and regional media entities that focused on their regions, their delegations, their politicians, but really no one sitting atop that without a geographic preference and saying, hey, we're looking at all these different counties, all these different communities that have a lot of issues in common. How can we better connect those things? And how can we better connect those communities to what's going on in Harrisburg and vice versa? So in terms, again, to get back to the question of the local area, that's really how we would focus. Now, again, we've made no predeterminations, right? Obviously, accountability of Reading City Hall, of county government, seems of vital importance. I mean, I worked for the Morning Call for some time. I have some knowledge of history of Reading politics, and I know it's a checkered past. And we know what happens when no one's watching. So those certainly, would be really important areas for us to consider, among a lot of other things. You
mentioned, and I'll come back to some of what you talked about, because you planted a lot of seeds here. But you mentioned the opportunity, creating an opportunity for people to learn how to become engaged, how to become involved in things. One of the things that's emerged over time is the inability anymore to find out what's going on, what events are there, how do I get involved in a process, what activities are occurring in the community. So does Spotlight going to address those kinds of concerns in any way?
Yeah, so one avenue that we do that with, and that we've done that with in State College, is by creating a new local email newsletter product. Now, again, not necessarily predetermined that if we were to do that in Reading, it would be email, would it be text, would it be something else? We're open-minded, right? But it's a vehicle for more than just the reporting. So the newsletter that we've created, I think we now have about nearing 4,000 subscribers in the State College region. It has our reporting and the news of the day, but it also has all the upcoming and local events. We're just starting a process to get news and notes from local meetings and to get more people back to local meetings, and incorporating that. It has, some positive sort of contributor material, great photos from the region. It's a balanced diet, right? And that's what's important, is we need to create balanced relationships, and we need to, portray the whole of the community, and also just, as much as we can, right, with the resources we have, play that role that you mentioned, which is just how can we create platforms to help disseminate important information? And the use of that kind of product for us has worked well. It's worked well on a statewide basis, and it's worked well in State College. So we would be looking at some kind of platform to do that here as well, with the Bureau.
Okay. That's great. One of the other challenges, and it's an issue in some ways that divides our community, is that Reading is the largest Hispanic population. It's the only major city in Pennsylvania with a majority Hispanic population. There are language issues. It has the largest school student population. It's English language learners. Is this one thing that could be helpful to bring the community together? Is the ability to have conversations that don't use language as a barrier. Is there going to be a Spanish option to this? Is there going to be some way to engage the Hispanic community in this conversation? I don't know.
Yeah,
Heather,
and I can let Heather.
But yeah, Heather, you want to?
I can let Heather talk to this real quick, but I just want to say, when Heather and I first talked, I told her that the only non-negotiable item of this study and the outcome was that concern was put first and foremost. If the process doesn't fully incorporate that issue and how we address it, and if the outcome doesn't fully address and incorporate that, then we will have failed, because it is an obvious major component of the community, and to not reflect it, not address it, and not incorporate it into everything we're doing, as opposed to making it like, oh yeah, it's another priority among all these priorities. No, it has to be incorporated into everything. It has to be baked into everything. And so that's really the one mandate I've given her, and I know I'll let her talk how she's gonna, work that into the weeks and months ahead.
Sure, just quickly. So we have, the contacts and processes in place to make sure that we offer our community listening sessions and focus group gatherings on a bilingual basis, with the help of some local translators and organizations that can help us to gather information from the Spanish-speaking population. And then also, as part of when we talked about distribution and multimodal distribution, how we can be effectively and efficiently delivering content to everyone across the community that wants to receive it. So that language piece is a really important, an important element to the study, and then also the outcomes of the project. Chris did make that a very clear mandate from the get-go on this project. But we are hoping that we can, engage those voices by making all of the same opportunities available to citizens of all kinds of backgrounds. So the voices are important to making this a go, and that is certainly something that is underway with our project. It's not in consideration; it will be happening, including the digital text survey, like I said, and the community sessions, and having bilingual representation for that community at the table as we build this framework.
So if I remember correctly, I heard you talking about the potential of 20 journalists working for Spotlight here in Berks County. Is that right?
I think I may have mentioned the 20 number. That is the the totality of Spotlight PA 20 plus statewide. So
Statewide.
Chris can speak to this, but the need and the presence in Berks County, I think would be quite a bit smaller than that, but
Right.
small but mighty. Chris?
Any idea, Chris, how many people you think would be appropriate for Berks County?
Yeah, sorry, my screen there froze a minute. Again, this is something we haven't necessarily predetermined because we want to see both what the community gives us in terms of feedback of need, what our philanthropic capacity study tells us, and then pairing that with what we think is sort of a minimum viable product to move the needle. So when we talk about that, it's we want to create something that is big enough to make waves, right? To have impact in the community, to be relevant in the community. And that takes a certain level, right? But we also want to have a staff small enough that we feel like we can sustain it in the long term. We don't want to launch something with big fanfare and lots of investment and lots of people's time spent to see it flare out in 2 years, right? That in many ways does more harm than good. So part of the purpose of Heather's work in this study is to help inform all of that process. To give you an idea, our State College Bureau, which covers Center County and Central and North Central PA region, has 4 people. There's an editor and 3 reporters. And that bureau costs about $500,000 a year to run, give or take. So that's just some kind of reference point for that.
So we'd be thinking maybe something along the same sorts of lines. Obviously, you're not a subscription service like a traditional newspaper. You're not depending on advertising. So where's the money come from?
Sure. So for Spotlight PA, the sort of statewide operation, on any given year right now, we're 65 to 70% institutional support. So that is a broad array of foundations, community foundations, and others who invest in our work all across Pennsylvania. I think we have about 19 or 20 total institutional funders, and about 14 or 15 of those are here in Pennsylvania. That is really important, right? Local.
Oh, you froze again.
Want to be able to then attract some kind of larger catalytic national funding, as Spotlight PA has been able to do. You really can't even have that conversation unless you can first show that the community is really invested in and doing its part. Beyond that, the rest is individuals. We have about 4,500 individual donors all across the state. They range anywhere from folks who give $5 a year, and send us a note each year with the $5 and say, if I could do a penny more, I would do a penny more. And if I could do a nickel more next year, I will do a nickel more. To folks, our largest individual donor, who has given $1 million. So we have a broad range of individual support. And again, that's really vital, right? I mean, I always talk about this is a two-way street. We believe we can provide content that's really valuable, that's really unique, and that really makes a difference. And if we do that, then we need folks to step up and say, just like Jim said, just like the hospital, just like the orchestra, just like the art museum, we recognize the vital importance of this work, particularly the kind of work we're doing, to our democracy. We need to support it. And if we don't, we'll suffer the consequences, which again, unfortunately, Reading has seen in really stark terms. And if we can do that and continue to grow and do that and spread the word and educate why this is important, then I really believe Spotlight PA is just beginning to scratch the surface of what it can be for Pennsylvania and communities across the state.
So it's a model that's a little similar to the way public television works. In big charitable donations and private donors giving as much as a $5 a month or something like that.
We've seen this,
Yes.
Dave, nationwide. There's the healthiest and most sustainable nonprofit news organizations have a broad philanthropic pyramid. There's some very generous individual donors or institutional donors at the top, but a broad base of individual members. And the 4,500 going on 5,000 that Spotlight PA has attracted is a testament to the value of the news, but it's also one of the largest of these across the nation. So it's as a funder, one looks at how healthy and broad-based the support is. You don't want to be alone. You want to support things that have genuine community support. And the fact that it's statewide, nonpartisan, ecumenical, and ranging from big donors, the Pittsburgh Foundation, the Heinz Foundation, Hillman, and so many individuals we view very positively. What our role has been with Spotlight PA, and would be in this case for sure, is to provide matching funds. We think it's very motivating to say, if you put in $1, we'll match it with $1. And that has proved helpful in individual fundraising in State College, and we would love to do that in Berks County.
Okay, good. I'm going to shift gears a tiny bit. A couple of years ago when I was teaching, I asked the students, where do you get your news from? And it was Twitter and YouTube. It wasn't newspapers, it wasn't public television, it wasn't commercial television. How are you going to deal with that? And Beth, I would love to have you comment on this.
Well, sure. Chris, why don't I let you start, and then I can provide some larger framing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a really important consideration. Actually, there's a question in the chat about our strategy to recruit bilingual, multicultural, intergenerational audience and journalists. And again, part of the reason that we're being so purposeful about this study and the work we're doing with Heather is because we want to take time to understand where different communities and folks within the county are currently consuming their news. Where are they getting it? Where are they reading it? And then we want to try to tailor our distribution of our work to those trends. In short, we want to try to meet people where they are and do a better job of that. Now, does that mean we're going to like strictly be a publishing platform on WhatsApp? No, of course not. We'll have all the traditional ways for people to consume the work, but I think it is really incumbent on us, particularly in a community like Reading, to be very purposeful and aware of where people are getting information now and then meeting them there. Whether that be social networks or whether that be building trust among information networks that otherwise exist, right? So if we think about information networks in a community, the media is one, but there are many others, right? Your church newsletter, the community association group, a community foundation, a rec center, the library, right? All of these institutions have networks of people that are connected to one another that exchange and pass around information. And how can we do a better job of connecting all those networks together so we can better distribute, quality, nonpartisan, trusted news in addition to everything else they are getting there. So that includes, what you mentioned, but it's really a broader question to the question in the chat as well. So part of what we will look at with this work with Heather.
Beth, I have a very brief thought about this, and I'm sure you know more about it than I do. We found in Philadelphia that particularly immigrant communities, the place they get news, communicate with one another, communicate with folks back home is chat. It's WeChat for the Chinese community, it's WhatsApp for the Hispanic community. And so our view has been not to resist the fact that that is where the audience is, but to lean into it. And if you have independent, nonpartisan news in that community's language, and they will find it and post it. And we see these venues, TikTok as well, as sources of growing audience and places to collaborate and reach the right people. So it's a glass half full view, I think.
Yes,
Oh,
love to hear
and
your
I think-
thoughts.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that's the exact right approach. Understanding that how we get the news, where we get the news has really changed incredibly dramatically. And it's important to kind of meet people where they are, in whatever forms they're doing it, by being a trusted voice. But I do think it's actually really worth, like, among ourselves, like thinking about how in the last 10 to 15 years, how you yourselves get the news has really changed, right? I mean, we can go back even further. It used to be that we kind of lived in this broadcast world, right? We all got our news from the same sources, the same trusted voices. We had this kind of shared truth that we all understood, right? Shared facts. And then, my colleague Laura Putnam, who's a historian, talks about, well, then we moved to what we call a narrowcast world, right? Fox News, MSNBC, these kind of different platforms started popping up, and we did change our news consumption habits, but we all knew what everyone was seeing, right? I could flip to MSNBC or to Fox and hear what different people were saying. And now we're in this really crazy new era that Lara refers to as a shadowcast world, right? Even if I have the same political viewpoints, the same demographics as you, I have no idea what you're seeing. What you see in your Google search results, in your Facebook feed, your Twitter feed, or X or whatever, what you're having in your private conversations and WhatsApp, it's completely different from what I am. And so we no longer have these shared facts and these shared truths in the way we used to, even relatively recently. And so that's, I think, really, again, where local journalism becomes so critical in kind of creating these shared facts on the ground for us, like this is what's going on, and these real shared understandings. And that's why I love what Chris was saying earlier about kind of some of the civic journalism aspects. So not just the accountability reporting, but some of these really basic, like, government functions, like how does election administration work in our county? What does the Department of State do versus what do our county election officials do? How do things get counted? Things like that are just this public service that creates these, we all have the same facts on the ground, that I think is missing right now and has become harmful. So again, that's why I'm really excited about the possibility of this bureau.
Well, this may not be a fair question, but I'm going to ask you it anyhow. Which do you think is a bigger challenge to us, the lack of information or the disinformation?
That's such a good question.
Yes.
I'm going to say all of the above. Yes, right? Like, we have this multiplicity of sources. There's way too much information being thrown at us all the time. And it's hard to know what to trust, right? Like, it is really hard. And we're not set up for it. Social media is not set up for it. Legacy media, in large part, hasn't been set up for it. And so I think having way too much information kind of leads us into these different paths that do have a lot of disinformation. But I will say I'm hesitant. I think disinformation is a really big problem. I do think we do see a lot of, fake news, things that aren't true. However, what I would say is that I think it's important not to get too caught up in that. I think it's really important to realize that there are still institutions that we can trust that are sharing, accountable, well-researched facts. And do they get it right 100% of the time? Of course not. But do they tell us when they don't get it right? Absolutely. And so I think that this kind of combination of way too much information, some fake information, and just people not knowing what they can trust is kind of part of the crisis that we're at.
Yeah, and the two things are really interlinked, which I guess seems obvious, but I talk about it like, imagine you're climbing up a rock wall, right? And you're looking around for a solid footing, right, for your next step. And there are now fewer and fewer footings on the rock, right? When there's less and less local news, trusted sources of news, whatever that may be, there are fewer and fewer footings on the rock. And that makes you uneasy. You're not quite sure where that next step should be. Maybe you're confused about how to get up, right? That creates what I call that sort of state of confusion. And state of confusion is really the precursor to mis and disinformation taking hold. So often is the case. Whether that state of confusion is created just by the state of being, right, fewer news outlets, or whether a state of confusion is being created on purpose, right? So confusion or false statements are kind of being put out to undermine a process or a situation, and it's creating confusion. And when there's confusion, what people do is they look around for something to grab onto. And that could be they're scrolling their Facebook feed, or they're on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. They see something about what they're looking for. It sounds real, and they latch because they're uncomfortable. They're on the rock wall and they need something to hold on to, and they grab it without maybe doing a thorough vetting, or perhaps not in a full context that would let them know that that's not a legitimate source of information. And so it's a really completely tied process from less information created or as sort of accidental or purposeful states of confusion, and then how people latch on, and that's how that mis and disinformation takes hold. So I don't necessarily view them as separate and distinct. I think they're all interrelated, which is why we see mis and disinformation on the rise in large part. Not on the rise in its production, right? Because anyone can produce mis and disinformation at any time, but it's become more advantageous because it's taking hold more. And why is it taking hold more? Because of the things I talked about. So it's not necessarily about its presence, it's about how is it grabbing hold.
We've had a couple questions that go to the issue of funding. And I know you're talking about foundation funding and private solicitation, private funding. Any thoughts about government funding? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I'll let Jim talk to this because there's a larger national conversation about this. All I'll say is, you know, it's a tricky wicket, right? And do I think there are examples of where it has worked? Yes. There was a government-created fund in New Jersey for local journalism, accountability journalism, an independent board that distributes that funds, and journalism is benefiting. And there are examples in some other communities too where we've seen it. It's largely been at a local or community or county level. New Jersey is a bit of an outlier. I think it was the first to do something statewide, maybe the second. But there's also been some conversations nationally. Look, we have to consider everything, right? But we also have to be realistic about what we think is possible in our current climate and politics. And again, going back to our position, Spotlight PA, is we can't just sit around and wait, right? We have to take ownership now. We have to take responsibility now to address this issue and do it collectively and pursue every avenue. And if that means in a few years we can open up another revenue avenue and another revenue avenue, absolutely anything we can bring in to grow that pie and sustain this vital work, then we do it, right? We don't discount anything, but I don't think we could count on it as sort of like, well, we can't do anything until that, because you might be waiting forever.
There have been a handful of legislative efforts, one that got very, very close to passage through Build Back Better, the Biden-backed national legislation, to use the tax law essentially to support local news. And that would be payroll tax credits for hiring and retaining journalists, tax deductibility for subscriptions to local newspapers, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, and tax credits for small businesses advertising in local news. And the reason that we were in favor of this was that it's, we think, First Amendment friendly, rather than having the current administration choose to back this news organization and not back that organization, which is too close to the line from a First Amendment perspective. This is letting the market decide where to put their chips. So there are a number of tax-oriented governmental policy possibilities, and I think you'll see more of that in the future. There's also a lobbying effort to get the Corporation for Public Broadcast, which supports NPR and PBS stations, to include digital startups and nonprofit news of this type in their funding, but they move pretty slowly. So I agree with Chris. I don't think it can be counted on anytime soon.
Heather.
Dave, could I chime in with just before we open up completely? I think, there's something that speaks to a couple of the questions that are in the chat right now that I think is important to maybe have a brief discussion on. Because we're talking about a nonprofit news model, but in almost every instance of a model like this launching, it is a collaborative model. So I think it's important to note that Spotlight PA's potential bureau launch in Berks County does not replace the media landscape that exists. It supplements it and it grows it. It's another piece. And I'm wondering if, Beth, Chris, Jim, if you have any comments on, how important the existing infrastructure is to a community when you're building a model like this that really relies and supports a collaborative design.
Yeah, we often talk about when we're in communities, right? We don't compete, we complete, right? It's about completing the news report for the community. And what we want to come in and be is really a catalytic partner, right? So to bring organization, right? Organization and collective action, doing what you're doing, right? Coalition building, educating on the importance of the issue, bringing that coalition to the fore, bringing some, new resources. And by resources, I mean really good reporters, right? There's a lot of talk around journalism, but at the end of the day, you want to move the needle, you bring in really good reporters that can write really good, important stories that matter to our lives. That's what moves the needle. That's what makes waves, right? That's what gets impact. And at Spotlight PA, we measure ourselves by two measures: quality and impact, right? And that's what the public service and nonprofit model allows us to do. And that puts our value and distinct value to the community, hopefully on display every day. And by doing that, by sharing that work with our partners in the region, which are vitally important because they have existing networks, right? We want to tap into every possible network we can tap into to build a new information network in the community, a collaborative one that uplifts what's there, right? We don't want to come in and we said this at this very beginning of Spotlight 2 in 2019 when we were traveling the state. We are not coming here to take resources from one area and move it to us. We're not coming to move the chess pieces, right? That makes no sense. That's a zero-sum game. We're coming to grow the pie. We're going to bring new resource and new quality journalism to the table. We're going to share it with you. It's going to be valuable to your news product and your audience. It's going to help your value proposition, right? We're going to bring together conversations. We're going to bring together discussions. We're going to push civic education. We're going to do it all together, right? That's what it looks like for us to be a catalytic partner. And we see that in State College. We see that in other communities where we don't even have a presence, right? But the local outlet uses our work so much that we've really become part of the discussion. That's the important role that Spotlight PA plays, and hopefully can be a catalyst for growth, for more news and information, right? To really grow off of the seeds that we plant.
Heather, I'm going to ask you to go into a little bit more detail about the process that's going to be happening over the next, it's what, 10 months left in this, and how people can become involved, how they can engage with the process.
Sure. So currently I'm in the process of setting up community listening sessions. So these are small groups of 10 to 12 in a public engagement session where really we're collecting, the insight, the opinion, and the views of community members from diverse backgrounds to help us put together the needs and the look for the model that we would present at the end of the year. We just launched through spotlightpa.org a Berks landing page. That page will be periodically updated. Currently, you can sign up for a newsletter there that'll keep you looped in with things that are happening in the project, but then also updates and opportunities to participate over the course of the year. I've started with organizing some of those groups through existing organizations and their stakeholders and their clients and constituents. Some of them will be open call, sign up to participate. The next phase will probably happen in the winter months when people might be a little bit more apt to sit down and take a couple minutes to provide some information. It'll go through a digital survey instrument to be able to gather some similar information as what we're discussing in the listening sessions, but in a more short form, easy fill out kind of, submission for community members across the county. We'll also be doing focus groups to discuss things like the multimodal distribution, the tech needs and testing products prior to any sort of launch, because once again, very intentionally not telling anyone what they need, but listening to what they want and making sure that we're answering with that with what the distribution would look like in the community. And I am available. I feel like I'm going to regret being like, I'm available to meet with everyone, but I'm available to talk to people as needed. I've taken on several one-on-one conversations, email conversations, social media interactions already, and I'm looking forward to more of them. Certainly, I mean, my email address is in the chat. It is on the spotlightpa.org/Berks page. Anyone who's interested in how they can be heard, if you have groups that you feel you would like to have included. I don't want to artificially present that I can interview 400,000 citizens of a county, but we are really trying to get a fair and accurate representation of multiple demographic participation into our study so that we can get a 360-degree view of what this bureau needs to be for it to be successful. So those are some of the items that'll be, rolling out over the next couple of months, and you can stay updated with them through me, through the spotlightpa.org website, social media, and communications, via email.
Okay. I'm going to call on a couple people, and then there are a couple people who have raised their hands to ask questions. We've got two people from different foundations here in the community. I want to get their reaction to what they're saying about this. Pat Giles, I don't know if you have any comments, or Heidi Williamson, if you have any comments about what we're hearing, what we're learning today, and how that fits into your framework, Community Foundation and the Why I'm Missing Foundation.
I guess I'll join in first. Yes, I mean, we certainly agree with what's been talked about in terms of the importance to the community to have a trusted, diverse source of local news and information. And I'm participating on the advisory committee to help work through what this might look like. And certainly we're very interested in figuring out the financial model and how locally philanthropy can contribute to not just, so we've talked about the launch of this, but the sustainability of it. And we're going to have to figure out how to rally all of the various funding opportunities we might have in the local community. But I think there's a great hunger and demand for what we've been talking about. And it's so exciting that we have a model that has already been tested in the state that we can work from, but adapt to meet our own local needs in the best way possible. So we're really thrilled and excited to be part of this process and anxious to see where this leads us.
Good. I want to ask Heather, your replacement temporarily, about how she sees this impacting on BCTV and community television.
I assume you're talking about me, Dave.
Yes.
Took me a minute. Hi, friends. Good afternoon. Yeah, I've got copious amounts of notes here. I think from the community media standpoint, I'm glad to hear, right, that this is not in replacement of, because BCTV already does incredible work. We've got stakeholders, we've got program producers, we have people who are committed to solid information. We'll celebrate 50 years in 2026. So having a partner that is willing to fill in the informational gap, because we're not a news station. So having someone, an organization of trusted folks who can produce content that is important, it's vital to our mission, but fills a space that we currently can't, is really exciting. I'm glad that Heather is rooting for the home team. Glad that Heather's a part of this project and able to bring this information back, especially as we move into strategic spaces, to really just fill in the trust that's missing in the community. So we're thrilled to partner already, but really, really excited for what this looks like in the future.
Okay, Ernie, I know you have a question. Is Heidi here?
I'm here, Dave.
Okay, go ahead, Heidi.
Hi, how are you?
Then we'll come to you, Ernie.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm Heidi Williamson. I'm with the Berks County Community Foundation, and Berks County Community Foundation is supporting the study that Heather is doing with Spotlight PA. And we made that grant to do this work because as a community foundation, part of our mission is to improve the quality of life in Berks County. And it's really, really tough to do that work without a robust media landscape to know what's going on and to have that piece of community information that will make all of us know a little bit more about what's happening. So we're thrilled that Heather has been brought on board to run this study and to figure out what that sustainability model looks like. The Community Foundation is not an organization that is going to be able to support a news bureau on its own financially with grants. It's something that needs to be supported by the community as a whole and from lots of different organizations and lots of different funding sources, so that there isn't one funding source that kind of has a thumb on the scale that is doing more than any other. So we're really sort of hands off in what the news beats would be, and even really the work that Heather's doing with the feasibility study, but with this idea that this is something that's going to benefit the whole community, and we can get the community behind it to support it financially so that it becomes something that really does represent all of Berks County.
Okay,
Thanks.
Ernie, you have a question?
I don't have a question. It's just have a comment here. Ryan Bryce, who is on this forum here, he was a colleague of mine on the Reading Public Library. And, you know, the press was a big part of that in getting that library fixed. And then also moving to the Reading Redevelopment Authority, or let's backtrack on that, Reading Water Authority, in getting that deal done. That was all done in the press. And we don't have that anymore in the city of Reading. So, you know, anything to move press forward, I'm in favor of, and we have to do it.
Good. Ryan, do you want to say anything, add anything to that?
No, I'll just piggyback on exactly what Ernie said. You know, I can remember David Costival sitting in those board meetings and accurately reporting what was going on, the board's decisions, and putting it out there in front of the community. And as Ernie said, it helped put the library where it is today. And at the Literacy Council here, we've been, you know, lacking the the resources, while we have some connections locally with other resources besides the Reading Eagle, there definitely is a void.
Okay. I'm going to start calling on people unless people want to raise a question here. And I see some familiar faces. I'm going to ask Rachel Romig to talk about, from her perspective, as a person involved with the broad business community in Berks County, and also a person who is pushing a lot of events and activities and news about the things related to the business community. Your reaction, Rachel?
When I first heard that this was happening, I personally, outside of the chamber, was very, very excited. I think that I echo what English has said, what Heather has said, what many of you share, that there is something missing. And we've seen this degradation of the news that we receive and the gaps there. And as an organization that wants to only disseminate information for the betterment of the business community, this can't go wrong. I think that having the transparency and honesty coming from the community, from top to bottom, side to side, is absolutely vital to continue moving our community in the right direction, from not just the city of Reading, but Berks County, Pennsylvania as a whole. So I'm excited, and we try to get information out about our members all the time. Our email went out today about some really great news for our members. So anything we can do to help promote what's happening, to keep people informed, to make their decisions for their successful business practices, I'm in. We're in.
Good. I'm going to keep calling on people, so please volunteer.
Dave, can I make a comment there to follow up on Rachel's comment? So I
Sure.
think importantly for this group and folks that are actively participating in this conversation from the get-go, one of the things that all of you will be able to help grow and influence in this study is including your network's voices to be heard in the study. So that might look like, when we launch the digital survey piece, what do your email lists look like? What do your contact lists look like? Who do you think should be participating and submitting, their opinion, their insight, their information to be counted, to be seen, to be heard as we draw the picture for this project? So, I mean, keeping that in your pocket as it's a little bit down the road, you all are really on the cutting edge of drawing this plan with us. And it's an exciting place to be. So your networks and your contacts are going to be invaluable in shaping this.
I see a hand from Bala Peterson, who's going to have a probably very unique perspective, former BCTV, Berks Community Foundation, and what you're trying to do in your real life. So Bala, what's your question and comments?
Wow, Dave, you set me up there. No. Just a two-part question. I don't know what the answer would look like, but so Chris, you talked a lot about the pain, right? And I think we all feel the pain, but what does success look like on a macro level for Spotlight? But then also what are the immediate next steps? So in the next 10 months, Heather's going to produce a report. And then what's going to happen? What? So just those two parts, and let's start there.
Yeah, two great questions. I mentioned earlier that Spotlight PA really judges a success and measures its progress by quality. So that is the quality of the journalism. And I want to just stay on that for a second, because you talk to anyone in journalism, they will talk to you about high quality journalism, right? Everyone says they have it. Everyone says they can do it. The reality is that a lot of it's not very good, right? So we don't just talk about it, we do it. And that from the beginning of Spotlight was something that I really hammered home with our folks, right? We are not just going to talk about this, we are going to show people what we mean. And people aren't stupid. They know what good journalism looks like. They will recognize it. And our bet, and our continuing bet, is that they will then step forward and support it so it can continue. So on a macro level for Spotlight, we're at, are we producing work that is making waves and driving positive change? Is it causing an issue to get increased discussion among community members, associations, groups? Is it causing lawmakers to talk about an issue or talk about a problem that they weren't talking about before? Is it causing bills to be introduced? Is it causing new legislation? Is where it might be necessary? Is it causing resignation? Is it causing reform?
Oh, you froze again.
More than a year, actually. Commitment to redistricting statewide. We knew no other newsroom was going to dedicate a whole reporter to redistricting. No one else was going to do it. But we also know how important that issue is, right? And if you're not sure, just look at how much money the lawmakers and we saw greater engagement on that issue in Pennsylvania this cycle than we've ever seen before. That's not all because of Spotlight, but Spotlight had a lot to do with it, right? Because it provided a greater platform for other folks who care about this to be heard, to get information out, to bring things to the fore. So on a macro level, that's what we look at. Are we moving the needle, right? We talk about that all the time. Are we moving the needle? Because it's incumbent on us to prove our value to you, right, to the state every single day. What is our value to this community, to this state? That is incumbent on us, right? And that is what we bring to the table, that we believe we can answer that call. But the other part of it, right, that we have to look at for measuring is the community responding? Is the community sustaining this? Is the community stepping forward in such a way that we can grow it? Because even Spotlight statewide, there's still plenty of important statewide topics we're not covering on a dedicated basis that we want to cover. But our challenge is, how do we do the most with the dollar we have today to make the most impact to get to tomorrow, and then do that again and again and again and again and grow a movement from that. Number two, what do we do from here? So one of the reasons I'm so excited about this project, creating kind of a handbook as to how this process can be replicated. As Spotlight PA looks at other parts of the state that's facing this similar issue, but also how we could share that with partners in other states who I work with closely, who are facing these challenges now. That blueprint, I think, will put in stark relief what Reading has today, what Reading and the people of Reading want and need, what Reading and Berks County can support and sustain, and what we need to bring to the table in terms of resources to meet that need. And then we start to have, right, the conversations about, okay, who can bring what to the table? All these different revenue streams, right? How can we activate the business community? How can we activate philanthropy? How can we activate statewide philanthropy? How can we activate individual membership? How can we activate national philanthropy? How can we bring together what we need to answer the call? And that's what the blueprint is going to give us the ability to do, right? When we talk to funders, we talk to individuals, they want to see we put in the work, that we understand the problem, that the community's invested, that they've stepped to the table, right? We're really just sort of a vehicle for that. And that's where those conversations will happen. And then, so we would want to put together, ideally, whatever our outlay would be for the initial bureau, if we think it's possible, we want to put together essentially a 3-year runway for that bureau. So the funding we would need for 3 years pledged or put forward, and then we would move forward with it. If we had confidence in the investment that we'd be able to sustain and grow from there, that's where we would execute.
Is there, this is a good question that came up. Is there any opportunity to engage young people who are interested in becoming journalists, some of the college students, some of our school students, in participating in the process in some fashion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll let Heather talk to the study process from the journalism side. That is an important component to us. Now, of course, we have to kind of build the house first before we invite people in. So we have to kind of lay the foundation and get a thing up and running, right? Like we did in State College. But using that example, now that we have it, we work with the News Lab at Penn State's Communication School. Now, mind you, we cover Penn State pretty tough, but we also partner with their News Lab in their Communications School. We're working with students there. We've had students work with us and with our team there. We've had students go out on election night and provide color and reporting that has fed our reporting. And we are working on getting a pilot program off the ground to return folks to community meetings to document what happens at those meetings and then make that information available, a program called Documenters. So yes, that is an important component and something that we would absolutely incorporate, but we do sort of have to like lay the foundation of what this thing is first before we, you know, think about all the things we can do with it. But that's really like, that's how I see these bureaus, is their foundations. They are the beginning, right? They are the beginning of something that we can build off, and we can build off it in lots of different ways that benefit the whole community.
One of the very first things that I mentioned was the reaction I got to sending the invitation out from the Lehigh Valley Business Journal saying they're here, they're doing some stuff, they're providing news about the business community. I'm hearing you, Chris, saying you're not going to try to get rid of all these other sorts of papers, news. The Eagle's still here, sort of. We have BCTV, we've got other ways of communicating, but what you're doing is helping fill the gaps, supplementing what's here and enhancing it. Is that fair to say?
Oops, sorry, I froze there for a moment.
We have to get you better Wi-Fi down in Lancaster County.
If I think I understand your question, let me just answer it in that, yes, you're exactly right. Like, and we take the same approach statewide. If there's a news outlet that's covering an issue really well, and they're covering it in depth and, you know, to a real valuable degree, we're going to go in a different direction. That's great. We got that base covered. Let's go cover this base, right? The notion or idea of competition is dead.
Nope.
We're losing Chris a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that drew us to the Spotlight model was this dedication to collaboration and cooperation among local media and not competition. The enemy is myth and disinformation and the creation of news deserts and the damage to community and democracy that creates. So the Reading Eagle is actually a very important, valued partner to Spotlight PA that runs Spotlight PA content pretty consistently. The Philadelphia Inquirer has run 50 or 60 Spotlight stories in the past year, often putting them on the front page. And they seconded their Harrisburg reporters to Spotlight. That's how dedicated they've been to the collaboration rather than the competition.
We're getting close to the end here, and I'm going to give the four of you a chance to do some closing comments here. And Jim, why don't I start with you? What do you want us to take away from this conversation today, and where this is headed?
My takeaway is that you have all the right elements, from a diverse group of voices on this call to a deep commitment to a listening process, not a rushed move to judgment, but a listening process, a reporting process, if you will, to determine what the community needs. Multiple funders, multiple individuals, and I would handicap the potential for success very high. You have both the need and the opportunity in Berks County, and we stand to help as a matching funder and as a supporter in any way that we can.
Chris, closing comments?
Yeah, if I can keep my internet for a second. I would echo Jim in just saying that, and I think I was feeling this to a degree, but Heather is really the reason that I now believe this so fully. There is a moment this is a moment. It's a moment for Reading and it's a moment for Berks County. And I can tell you, watching the journalism landscape across the state and the nation, these moments don't come twice. They just don't. There aren't enough resources. There isn't enough talent. There isn't enough leadership. There isn't enough initiative. They don't come twice. And there is a moment here. And I got to tell you, I was messaging Jim on the side. I said, Jim, I've got goosebumps. This is one of the best meetings on this topic in this space that I've been a part of. And it just reinforces what Heather's been telling me. And so all I would say is I hope others feel that moment and that we can harness that and step forward and take advantage of it. And we're ready and willing and excited to do it with the community.
Beth, some final comments from you, and I'd love to hear some more about what do we do about this information.
Well, I've got good news, Dave. This is one of the answers. Bring Spotlight PA to Berks. I mean, really, Jim, Chris, everything you've said, Heather, the process you're running, the questions on this call, I think, you guys are in a really enviable position, and there are counties all across the state who would love to have this opportunity. And so I'm so excited for you all and hope you're able to take advantage of it and, create a bureau that really serves Berks. And it seems like you have all the right ingredients to do that, and all the right energy and people willing to pitch in. So I'm excited to see what comes of it. And I have to tell you, the Pit Disinformation Lab will be watching very closely, because I think there's actually not a lot of good research around, what happens when good news sources do come in, because they don't come in often, right? And so I want to see, like, can we measure an effect? And I suspect that, I hope that you all will really see the possibility of a bureau, paying dividends in terms of improving trust, in terms of improving civic participation, in terms of improving accountability. So I'm really excited for you all.
Thank you. And Heather, your closing comments and reminding everybody how to get involved.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who took the time today. I have been amazed since the first day I started, the amount of outpouring of openness, and interest and questions and the want to participate and to be heard across this project. And it's only getting to be more as the days go by. It's really incredible thing to be a part of, and I'm very excited to be a part of something that is so exciting and important for Berks County. I think it speaks. I want to thank Jim and Chris and Beth for joining us today. All of your institutions are, so impactful in this area, and the fact that you've so generously come forward to talk and share and take phone calls and emails, and really be a help and guidance on this project is incredible. I feel like what we're doing right now, the state is watching. Public press went out this morning, a letter from Chris through Spotlight PA to their partner publishers about this project, and the feedback already has been really good and really interesting. We have an opportunity in front of us to revitalize our media landscape here in Berks County, and I'm looking forward to doing it with all of you.
Okay, and with that, I will thank all of you for joining us today, participating in this good conversation, good questions. We will, as I said, send the video to everyone who registered, so you get to watch it all again if you want to. We'll be posting it on the Berks Alliance website. We'll also share with you the contact information that people gave you in the chat function. We'll have that, include that in the email message to you all. Thank you. This is a very exciting opportunity for Berks County. It could be very, very significant for us in many, many ways. So appreciate the work, the effort, the interest in coming here, and appreciate everybody else's interest for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Dave.
good rest of your day.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Heather.